This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com and GatheringMagic.com, your place to explore the game.
Hi, I'm Uriah, and this is my Tobias Andrion Commander deck. This is Tobias Andrion, not really a powerhouse of a commander. In fact, as a 4/4 for 5, he's pretty plain and underwhelming. The reason he is this commander for this deck is because this is a popper deck. I have featured before my Gerard of the Closed Fist popper deck on this channel. Also, I've had other popper decks featured. It's something that I don't get to play a lot, but it is something that, because it is restrictive and restriction breeds creativity, it makes me play with cards I wouldn't otherwise play within a commander format, which are still fun to play. So again, he's just a 4/4 for 1 blue, 1 white, and 3. I have 11 islands in the deck and 9 plains for my basic lands. Moving on to the other cards. All of these cards at one time or another are printed or were printed at common, so even if the common symbol is not shown on the card, it still counts as a popper deck. All commons, including the commander, which online on MTGO is printed as a common. So for mana fixing, we have Command Tower, Opal Palace, which also gives counters to my guy. Being a 4/4, he's pretty small, so making him bigger after I cast him a couple times is pretty important. We also have Rupture Spire, Transguild Promenade, Shimmering Grotto, Azorius Guildgate, Tranquil Cove, Azorius Chancery, and Sejiri Steppe, just a utility land here, giving one of my creatures protection from a color till the end of turn. And Halimar Depths, just trying to set up my draws. Another one of the utility lands I run is Haunted Fengraf, pretty good for getting a creature back. Also have a couple of fetch lands in here with Terramorphic Expanse, Esper Panorama, and Bant Panorama. Now you will notice there are a lot of lands in here. There also is a lot of mana fixing. Because this is not a green deck and it is a popper deck, it can be difficult to get the lands and the colors that I need when I need them. So there are a lot of cards in here dedicated to getting colors and mana just to make sure the deck actually functions. For the mana rocks, we have Darksteel Ingot, Manalith, Fieldmist Borderpost, which is from Shards of Alara, comes into play tapped. You can tap for a white or blue, and if I pay one and pick up a basic land, I can do that as opposed to paying the mana cost on it, which is 3. Azorius Signet, Azorius Cluestone, Mindstone, Pristine Talisman, Armillary Sphere to get some more lands. Pilgrim's Eye also gets me a land. And when I attack, Explorer Scope can also get me a land. So you see a lot of the deck dedicated towards trying to get the mana, trying to find the mana, just to make sure that I don't completely die on my face. Because this is an all-common deck, that's very easy to do. It's just to die anyway. So I need to try to make it as consistent as possible. And sometimes that results in flooding, but there are a couple cards in here which help against that, and we'll see those here soon. When I first built the deck, the first version had a lot of Exalted in it. That has since been cut down. There aren't a ton of giant creatures in this deck, and that means I'm not usually swinging with a bunch of my smaller creatures. Most of my small creatures are utility creatures. I do have a few, I guess you could say, larger creatures, which top out around 4/4, 5/5, 8/8 at the very high end, which even in itself not the biggest creatures out there. So I'm not really attacking with multiple creatures most of the time. That's why it started more Exalted, but it has been cut back just because I haven't found the creatures that have Exalted to be the best ever. Frontline Sage is still in here because he does give me a looter ability as well as being an Exalted card. And then the other Exalted card I still run is Aven Squire just because it is flying, so that's some kind of evasion as well if I want to attack with just him. Also, when I built the deck, I had an Extort sub-theme in here. Since then, some of the Extort cards have been cut as well, just because they didn't perform as well as I needed them to. I have 2 Extort cards in Basilica Guards, which is just a 1/4 defender. and then also Syndic of Tithes, which is just a 2/2 with Extort. Some of the best creatures at common in my view are the Flag Bearers. This is Standard Bearer. It's a 1/1 for 1 white and 1, and it says that if an opponent plays a spell or an ability that could target a Flag Bearer in play, that player chooses at least one Flag Bearer as a target. The creature type for this is a Flag Bearer. So that means any kind of positive pump spell, any kind of aura, any kind of positive ability would need to go to my Standard Bearer first, or if it's a kill spell, it has to go with the Standard Bearer first, which is a 1/1, so it's going to die to most things, but it's going to allow my other creatures to dodge at least one removal spell before they can start pointing them at them. And then the better Flag Bearer is the Coalition Honor Guard, 2/4 for 4 mana, which also has the same ability that it has to be targeted if there's a Flag Bearer in play. For my other creatures here, I have the Mistblade Shinobi. This bounces creatures on my opponent's side, which might be problems for me if I can ninjutsu it in or just deal damage with it. I also have Sunscape Familiar. Doesn't make any green spells my deck cost less because I don't run green, but it does reduce the cost of my blue spells. It's an 0/3 for 2. I have Kor Skyfisher as a pretty efficient 2/3 flyer for 2. All I have to do when it enters play is return a permanent I control in my hand. Waterfront Bouncer allows me to spell shape and essentially unsummon a creature. Because this is such an underpowered deck, I do have an alt win con with Infect. Blighted Agent is the only Infect creature I have in the deck, but as a 1/1 with Unblockable, he can eventually get in there, especially if I have the Exalted creatures out perhaps, or some of the equipment that I run. Kor Sanctifiers, a 2/3 that disenchants when it comes into play if I pay the kicker. Disruptive Student, not the best counter spell ever, especially on a creature. It's a 1/1 for 3 mana, but I can tap counter target spell unless the caster pays an additional 1 mana, play this ability as an interrupt. So it's essentially a force spike on a stick. It just makes the opponent have to think about it and play around it. And if they forget and they don't, then boom, I get a counter spell. If not, I could just start making them, pay the mana, and maybe that'll shut off some of the other abilities to play spells that turn if they're constrained on mana. Mana War, 2/2 bounces a creature that comes into play. A great, even I think could be played in normal commander decks, which I have one in another deck I play. That's not Pauper. Thraben Sentry, it's a 2/2 vigilance. When another creature I control dies, I can transform it. And the transform side on this is a 5/4 trample, which if for this deck is one of the more powerful creatures I can get on the board. We have Guardian of the Guild Pack, a 2/3 protection from monocolored. There are a lot of monocolored creatures out there, so sometimes this basically just reads unblockable. Speaking of unblockable, I have Amphin Pathmage, a 3/2 on 4. For 3 mana, I can give target creature can't be blocked until blocked this turn. So if I have something that I need to get through that is big, but I have a lot of creatures in my way, I can spend a couple mana and get it through. Archaeomancer, just to return target instant or sorcery from my graveyard to my hand. I also run Mnemonic Wall in here as well, which we'll see soon. Just to go ahead and get some more value out of the instant sorceries that I can run. Hussar Patrol, probably not the best creature in this deck because it's a 2/4 with Flash. Sometimes that can act as a kill spell if I'm coming, or if someone's coming at me with a smaller creature. It also has Vigilance as well, so it's great to attack and block if I need it. Of course, probably the best blue common creature ever, maybe, Muldrifter. There's the Mnemonic Wall. Also returns that instant or sorcery from my graveyard to my hands. Lairwatch Giant, another one of the larger creatures I have in this deck. 5/3 on 6. It can block an additional creature, and if it blocks 2 or more creatures, it gains first strike until the end of the turn, which means this guy is great on defense. Scrap Diver Serpent, a 5/5 on 7, which is quite expensive, but it is unblockable as long as the defending player controls an artifact. As this is Commander and mana rocks exist and equipment exists, this quite easily is a 5/5 unblockable, even though it does cost 7 mana. The biggest and best creature in this deck would be Ulamog's Crusher, the 8/8 on 8 with Annihilator 2. It has to attack each turn if able, but that's usually never a drawback. Getting into some of the instants and sorceries, this first part is just removal for various things. This is erase, exile target artifact or enchantment. I also have Allay, which is destroy a target enchantment with a buyback. Normally it costs 1 white and 1. The buyback is 3. So for 5 mana at instant speed, I can just start taking out pesky enchantments that my opponents control. I have Viridian Longbow in this deck, just like in my other Pauper deck. This one doesn't work as well because there are no Death Touch creatures in it, but still being able to send around 1 damage. Perhaps if I have a lot of mana out, moving it between creatures after I tap it, it can get a little bit of damage out there that I need. Otherwise, I'm just pinging for 1 on the end step. Reprisal, an instant for 1 white and 1, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. In Commander, that reads probably 70% of creatures. Journey to Nowhere, exile a creature as long as this remains on the battlefield. Rebuke, destroy target attacking creature on 3 mana. I also have Faith's Fetters in here, a great card that can see play in non-Pauper Commander. It shuts off a permanent, basically a non-land permanent. Can't attack, can't block, can't use the activated abilities, which is most things. Oblivion Ring, a better Journey to Nowhere because it hits any non-land permanent. Aether Toe, I can put target attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library. I can also conspire it, which you don't see a lot of, which means I can tap 2 untapped creatures I control that share a color with the spell, which in this case is either blue or white. When I have it on the stack, it is blue or it is white, so I have to choose when I do this. But it does give me a couple options here if I want to conspire it. I'm not sure if I've ever actually conspired this. I don't play the deck a ton. I think maybe it has come up once or twice, but it just seems like this would be a good card that should fit. Into the Royal, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If I pay the kicker, draw a card. I'm usually going to wait till I can pay the kicker on this, just so I can get more value out of it. The best buyback spell ever, Capsize. You know what that does. Some ability to tap down permanents. Maybe I do have a lot of smaller creatures on the board and my opponent is getting low in life. If I can end step, tap a bunch of his creatures with Replicate and get in there for the win, then hey, I'm going to do it. Flood is a great card. This might be one of the MVPs of the deck. It's a 1 blue enchantment, and then for 2 blue I can tap target creature that does not have flying until the end of turn. So whether this is going to be played on defense and tapping down their best attacker or attackers each turn, or being played offensively to tap down their defenders, the double blue can hurt, but because I'm running so many lands and so many mana fixers, I can usually get a few activations out of this pretty easily. Have, of course, the classic counterspell, just 2 counter spells. The only other counterspell I run in this deck is Overrule, which lets me counterspell unless the controller plays X. I can also gain X life. Because this is a Pauper deck, I'm going to get beat up on, and so I need to gain as much life as I can. We have a Pacifism, kind of, in Cessation. It's 1 white 2, and it says enchanted creature can't attack. So there is no can't block on this, but it does say when Cessation is put into the graveyard from play, return it to its owner's hand. So basically the Rancor ability, this is great to shut down your opponent's best attacker, and if they decide, hey, I'm going to kill that attacker and get rid of Cessation, nope, Cessation can go back to your hand and you'll play it on their next best attacker. Steal the Godhead to make my Tobias, a 6/6 lifelink unblockable, which for this deck is huge. Also to give Tobias some Shroud, I have Diplomatic Immunity. And also for some more Shroud and Unblockable, I have Whisper Silk Cloak, one of the better equipments at common. Also another great equipment in uncommon is Bone Splitter, +2/+0, just for 1 mana. For more enchantments for Pump, I have Brilliant Halo, a +1/+2 for 1 white and 1, and when it's put into the graveyard from play, I can return it to my hand. So it's a great repeatable Holy Strength. Heuristic Study, an amazing draw spell, obviously, as most people know, and it's common. Yay! Compulsive Research, some more draw. Usually discarding a land, not going to be a big issue in this deck. Brainstorm, I do have a couple ways to shuffle my deck, so this is not the biggest thing. I generally don't get Brainstorm locked, but this lets me draw and get some more answers when I need it. Mycosynth Wellspring, it lets me draw, or get a basic land, I should say. That's more of that filtering and getting the lands that I need in order to play the spells. Now, if I do have a bunch of lands in play and I still have a bunch of lands in my hand, I can use a couple of my retrace cards in the deck. The first is Una's Grace. For 3 mana, target player draws a card, and I can retrace it. This is actually great. When I first started playing Commander, this was in all of my blue decks. I think retrace is probably underplayed. We also have Sen's Enlistment, which gets me 2 1/1 white Kithkin Soldier creatures for 4 mana, and I can also retrace that with extra lands. A couple other cards in the deck. Remember the Fallen. This lets me return a creature or an artifact from my graveyard to my hands, or I can do both. Soul Barrier at 1 blue 2. Whenever target opponent casts a creature, Soul Barrier is going to deal 2 damage to them unless they pay 2 mana. Usually they're not going to pay the 2 mana. They're just going to take the 2 damage. So eventually this can maybe start adding up, and with my creatures getting in maybe unblockable, might be enough for me to go ahead and put a killing blow in. I also have Momentary Blink, a great spell, just to blink one of my creatures out. And then finally, to protect my creatures, I have Mizium Skin. I can overload this and give all my guys hexproof and also pump their toughness a little bit until the end of turn.
Thanks for watching CMDR Decks. Please subscribe and favorite.